from the shattered remains of the White Gold Tower. The citizens of the Empire shuffle along, as broken and sundered as the home from which they hail. Great Lich Mannimarco, King of Worms and Lord of the Grave, having recently unleashed his devoted followers upon the once great city, now seeks to rebuild it and her people in his own twisted image. With swarms of undead legions backed by cold-hearted spellcasters, the most devoted and deserving following the Lich King's very own methods. The Worm Cult is set to travel far and wide across the Astral Sea, seeking new lands and distant realms to ravage, raise, and repeat. The fallen used fuel this dreadful cycle, as cold and endless as the grave. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Kurojaku, and today we are going to go over my Worm Cult Mannimarco themed build, Necromancer build for Age of Wonders 4. If you like the build, you like what you see, and have any other ideas for builds, let me know in the comments, like, subscribe, all the normal YouTube stuff. Anyways, all that out of the way, let's get into it. But before we actually do get into it, there is something I need to clarify before we go into the details of this build. This is being recorded before the Thrones of Blood update comes out. However, I have tested this on the beta patch for the Thrones of Blood update. The reason why this is important is because we are using Mystic Summoners, and they did get a pretty substantial nerf in a couple ways, and I will talk about that when I get to the culture. Another thing to mention when it comes to necromancy builds, that's what this is, it's mostly a necromancer build, so one thing I do want to explain, for those of you who are new, or playing for your first time, or simply haven't tried a necromancer build before, or any Magic Origin build really, but especially when it comes to necromancers, race traits take a back seat. The reason why this is the case is because Magic Origin units and undead, we're just talking about undead, so for the sake of speeding this along, I'm just going to refer to undead, but this does apply to Magic Origins as well. They do not get racial traits. The skeletons that you resurrect after a battle are not your race, typically, usually. They are whatever race you happen to kill. So if you fought a bunch of toad people with hideous stench or whatever, and you resurrect skeletons from those toad people, they're going to be toad skeletons with those racial traits. There are ways to use your own racial traits on skeletons, but that is not all the way until tier 4 tomes. It's not really something you heavily build around, and it's definitely not something that I am building around here with this build. So out of the way, when it comes to racial traits, instead of focusing on what we can't use, I like to focus them all on what we can use, which in this case is our ruler, our heroes, and our tier 3 casters that come with Mystic Culture. So, I also did a little fun flair here as I need to decide on a race for the Worm Cult, and I decided why not do Imperials again? Haven't seen the Imperial video. There it is. There's maybe I'll link it or something, I don't know. Go watch it. Good build, fun build. I decided to make their traits opposites of the Imperials. They are a corrupted Imperials, so instead of cheerful, we have cold-blooded, which is great. They actually kind of don't need this as much because skeletons are now expendable units, so they don't suffer morale loss, but originally it was useful. I just like that's the opposite of cheerful. Then instead of defensive tactics, we have overwhelm tactics or aggressive tactics, which gives you a critical chance when moving in a buddy system. Most of my armies are going to include a hero or ruler and one tier 3 summoner. You move them in a buddy system, they both get this buff, which is great. And then Arcane Focus makes all your casters do more damage. This includes your heroes using any sort of staff or orb weapon. On to the culture. Like I mentioned, we're using Mystic Summoners, and so now's a good time to go over what has changed with Summoners. If you've played Summoners before, you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you have not played Summoners before, you'll just get used to the new way Summoners are done, but they did get nerfed pretty substantially. Real quick though, all these units The Arcanists, the Guards, the Spell Shields, the Soother. I mean, Soothers kind of have a niche, kind of, sort of, early game, but not really. I mean, yeah, I guess having one early game in your main party can be nice. We don't care. These are filler units when you don't have skeletons or you're still working on getting skeletons. Sure, make some of these spell shields are okay. What we're really here for are our tier 3 summoner unit. It is a support unit. Unlike the other twos, which get cast battlecasters, we get supports. The important thing, however, well, two important things. One, they can summon a magic origin unit they can summon an elemental based on whatever spell you casted. Now, all of our spells are basically going to be either shadow or astral, which means you can either choose to get shock units or skirmisher units out of this. This isn't the important part, but extra units is always nice. The real thing we want, Astral Bond. To link with any magic origin, this includes undead. You can link to undead with this. Great buff for melee units, giving them the extra retaliation. Solid buff for range units, giving them the increased accuracy, though the really strong ranged units tend to have like AoEs I can't miss, so it's not the most useful. Frenzy is really nice. I believe that's strengthened every time you land an attack. Super good spell to have. This is why we always want one in every one of our stacks along with a hero. We'll talk a little bit more about heroes in a second. But what has changed? What has changed with summoners? Summoners have received, I believe, four main nerfs to summoners. Nerf 1, they don't get astral echoes from researching. That's not really the biggest deal. Astral echo mechanic, it basically lets you spend echoes to super level up a magic origin unit all the way to legendary. So you roam around the map and collect them. Before you got them from research. Now we don't get them from research anymore. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. I'm very stingy with my astral echoes and I save them for tier 4s and above. So it didn't bother me. Just don't spend it on skeletons or anything useless like that. Second nerf. Currently, if we look on live, which I am looking at the live build currently. So if you look currently, magic origin units get increased morale for each friendly unit with this property. However, this has now been reworked. Instead of this, it is now instead, this unit will now get 1 defense and 1 resistance for every adjacent magic origin unit to this unit. Basically, it's defensive formations, but instead of standing in a buddy system with a racial unit, you have to stand with a magic origin unit of some form, including undead, which I think is a decent change and actually maybe even arguably a buff. Another thing to note, and I can't show it here, I might try to find a clip and put it on screen. There is a buff for all your heroes and your ruler called Master Summoner, which would give increased damage, increased health, I believe, and cost reduction. They have removed all the combat stats from that buff. It is now only a 10% cost reduction, which is a pretty big nerf. Another pretty big nerf is you have a special trait as a Mystic Summoner, where anytime you do a combat spell, all magic origin units will get a heal, and they will gain strengthened. This got a double whammy. It said it on the patch notes that they removed strengthened, so now it's just an AoE heal, which is fine. It's not as good as it was, but it works. The real problem is that if you race transform your units into undead with like Fetid Legion, which we do, Fetid Legion cultural units or racial units, Fetid Legion racial units did not receive the magic origin summoner heal when casting combat spells at all. Just pretty big. Most of our army is not racial units anyways, but it is something to keep in mind as another nerf. So if you've played with it a lot, undead with summoners, just know that going forward. And one last thing before I go into society traits, I don't know if this is a bug or if it's because I chose a Wizard King ruler, I'm not sure. But for whatever reason, Mannimarco does not have the +1 defense, +1 resistance trait. Don't know why it's not there. Have no clue. Don't know if it's intended or a bug. I don't think it's a Wizard King problem because, I mean, the Dragon ruler in the last build gets Affinity Incarnate, so that can't be it. But keep that in mind. That's enough talking about this. Let's move on to the actual build. It's a lot to get over just because they are changing things. Alrighty then, let's finally move on to the racial traits. First one, mana channelers. This is pretty straightforward. The real big thing, we're not really using summoning spells that often. Maybe fallen angels later on. The big thing is that increased experience gain for magic origin units, especially those low rank tier 1s, tier 2s that you're not going to spend your astral echoes on. This just helps them rank up quicker. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then I went with cult of personality. It is a worm cult. I kind of had the idea of using heroes as buffed up versions of necromancers, essentially. The tier 2 necromancer unit you get from your first tome. I kind of use heroes as a buffed up version of those with the warlock bond, where you link to a unit. That unit then gets, I think, regeneration and resurgence or something like that, along with the damage buffs you get from your summoner tether. They can both link to one unit. So a lot of my stacks consist of a summoner, a hero or a ruler, a ace unit, a dragon, a reaper, a titan, a fallen angel, something 4 or 5, tier 4 or 5, and then a lot of fodder units, either tier 1 skeletons or tier 3 corrupt souls at a higher level when I have more resources. Technically, you can cheese cult of personality and hire like other rulers and stuff. I don't like to do that. I just stick to heroes with this trait. We skim over tomes, as usual. We'll come back to that. We're going to use a Wizard King. Pretty straightforward. Double mana casts. It's fantastic. And here's our boy Mannimarco with his Fetid Legion transformation. All the information, if you wish to copy his design, is right there for you to use. And the Staff of Necromancy from the Necromancy Origin, or I think is what they're called on the Pantheon. Fun fact, if you have this unlocked and you go to make a new staff in-game in the item forge, you can use the Necromancy staff as a blueprint and then add more things on top of it to keep the Raised Dead built into the staff, if you wish. And here is the faction, pretty straightforward. They're just made to be Imperials. Mystics ended up being perfect for the Worm Cult. They even have the little silver mask they have in Elder Scrolls Online. And of course, all the final data for the build. I went with the theme that the main city is the Imperial City, but broken. This is an altered world where Mannimarco actually succeeded in twisting the Mage's Guild. If you played Oblivion, this makes sense. If you haven't played Oblivion, just have fun with the cool Necromancer and move on. As for advanced settings, I just reused all of the Oblivion names again. For heroes, I mentioned before, but we are using Warlock heroes. Unfortunately, they can't start with the Staff of Necromancy. I think that's kind of lame. I feel like they should be allowed to. But regardless, I didn't do anything specific for these. Pretty straightforward. Death Knights are another decent option if you want. And now, let's discuss the tomes. It wouldn't be a Necromancer build if we didn't start with Tome of Necromancy. Obviously, we are going to start with Tome of Necromancy. It lets us get our soul economy right from turn 1. It does unlock the Necromancers, but I honestly skip these. They're okay, but like I said, we use our Warlocks as basically a better Necromancer. Skeleton reanimation is very important to pick up. Necrotic projectiles is very important to pick up as well. Necrotize is an extremely strong spell early game, allowing you to pick a target, infect them, and essentially get numbers in your favor. And if you wish, you can also use Rotting Explosion early game as well. I don't really mess with this too much because I kind of want to hold that soul economy for getting a bunch of skeletons on the field early on, but you're still waiting for mana economy to catch up, or you just want to cast this on like a zombie or something and you get like a good opportunity with a bunch of enemies packed together. It is a nice spell to pick up as well. Then we're going to take Tome of Evocation. Also, that's Soul Well. I forgot to mention it. Very important to build this. This is, I think there's only 2 buildings in the game that give passive soul income, and the next one is until tier 4. Tome of Evocation. Main thing we're here for is Lightning Blades for all the extra damage, Lightning Focus, which is going to get Electrify on all our mages, When it comes to skeletons, you want to prioritize battle mages over archers. In fact, I would avoid skeleton archers unless you direly need troops right now. They're better than nothing. However, in general, prioritize battle mages. There are more buffs for battle mages across the build. Fulmination is nice. Lightning Torrent is pretty good. Also, on the topic of Lightning Torrent, keep in mind your summoner's default damage type is lightning. So this -1 lightning resistance does help. Then Tome of Souls is our first tier 2 tome. I would personally, you don't have to take these in any particular order. I would honestly, I started taking Doom Herald earlier on, but you can go either order. We're just going to talk about it as I have laid out. But really, tier 2, take your pick. Starting with Tome of Souls, if you wish. Soulbinders is a really nice enchant to help your soul economy. Not only do you get more souls, but also it's just a flat 10% damage buff for all your casters that they can set up themselves. Unlike the electrifying one, they don't get bonus damage. With Lightning Focus, they do get bonus damage with Soulbinders. Bone Horrors, take it or leave it, they can be skipped. It's up to you. We'll talk about that in a second. I will circle back on that in a second. The rest of this, Feast of Souls and Soul Overflow might be a little more valuable now that Fetid Legion units cannot be healed by the Magic Origin Summoner trait. They will still be healed by this because they're still undead. And this, but they don't get the passive heal. So it's good to keep in mind. And Banshees are actually a really solid tanky tier 3 battle mage. If you want premium battle mages to replace skeleton mages with in later armies, Banshees. Banshees are definitely the way to go. Tome of the Doom Herald, we are going to get Joy Siphoners, which is going to allow our heroes, our ruler, and our summoners, we don't really use a lot of other units, to steal morale, which is great, but the main thing it's here for is to boost cruel weaponry. The lower morale gets, typically by units dying, the closer they get to routing, the more damage you are going to do. It's a huge buff to a lot of your really weak tier 1 skeleton units. That is, unless you replace those tier 1 skeletons with Corrupt Souls, which I really love this unit. They're super underrated. They're very, very slippery. I believe they also have Pass-Through, which is great. And they have a spell that gives them a potential ranged insta-kill. And even if it does not kill, 30 frost damage on a 4 range for a melee unit on a low cooldown is crazy solid. Having 3 of these in an army as a frontline can get a lot of damage. Even 2 of these as a frontline can get a lot of damage done. This is what I was saying when I said I was going to circle back. So when it comes to tier 3s, choice is yours. You can take the Corrupt Souls, which are kind of like, almost like a tanky skirmisher because they're melee units, but they have the ranged attack. But they are fighters, so they don't really have any other traits going on. Or if you prefer, you can take the Bone Horrors and get the Shock unit, because these are tier 3 Shock units. It does summon additional units on your side as well. They're both legit for front lines. Take your pick. I like Corrupt Souls more, but it's up to you. Now, unlike tier 2, tier 3, I would highly recommend you start with Tome of Great Transformation, because this is where you get your Great Transformation. Whiteborn. Why'd I keep calling it Fetid Legion? Fetid Legion is the unit enchantment. Whiteborn is the race transformation. I'm a little dumb. We're just gonna move on. Whiteborn turns your units undead, gives them lifesteal. Used to also let you use your Magic Origin summoner stuff to heal everyone. Doesn't do it anymore, like I said earlier, which kind of sucks. It is frustrating. You do get lifesteal, which is nice. I kind of, if it was an intended nerf, I really hope they undo that nerf. Or maybe it's a bug and then they fix the bug. I don't know. But I think it's a very cool synergy between the undead race transformations and one specific culture that I hope they bring back. But as of now, my testing on the Gargoyle update, or the beta patch, doesn't work. You don't get the heal. Not on your racial units, not with this transformation. Fetid Legion will give all of your melee units increased hit points, and they inflict weaken, which is going to increase the longevity of your squishy units. But keep in mind, this also means the trashy little zombies that you get, they also inflict weakening aura. So it's a pretty nice little thing to have. The rest of this, it's up to you. Bone dragons are pretty nice though, if you can get them. However, there are better tier 4s. Tier 4 units that we're going to talk about. Amplification, the main reason we're taking this is Astral Blood. I mean, I love this tome. It's one of my favorite tomes in the game. Getting Fortune for increased crit chance every time you cast a spell. Awesome. You're using a Wizard King. Even better. Frenzying Focus, making all of your, well, your mostly your summoners, but also your Banshees. If you happen to use Banshees, it'll buff them as well. More range, and they get Frenzy. Excellent. Now, I do not believe you can stack this. I don't believe if you put the Summoner Tether that gives Frenzy onto a Banshee, I don't think they get 2 Frenzies. I don't think it works that way. I think you can only have 1 Frenzy source, which is another reason why I wouldn't recommend really putting your Summoner Tether on a Banshee. Just keep that in mind. The rest of this, it's up to you. You know, it's whatever. You can take Amplified Arrows to make the Skeleton Archers like slightly better or something. I'm just going over the parts of the tomes that matter, or the key highlights, and obviously the rest of the tome comes with it. On to tier 4, and this is when things get really, really fun. Tome of the Revenant, added with the Archon Prophecy update. It's kind of the reason I wanted to make the Mannimarco build to begin with. This is also where you get your other structure to get more souls. I would highly recommend you plan around having this late game, right? So try to have some of your research posts set up in a way where you can plop this in the middle and get as much soul income out of it as you can. It can actually be pretty important. A lot of the units, the Undead Titans and the Fallen Angels, have a pretty hefty soul cost. This is going to go a long way. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, Desecrate Structure from Tome of Great Transformation, also very crucial in helping you upkeep this soul economy. Back to Tome of Revenant. What do we want from this? Damn near everything. Also, the Necropolis lets us draft our own skeletons with our own racial traits, not the most helpful. However, drafting our mages as cheap tier 1 mages, not a bad idea. Being able to draft Corrupt Souls is kind of nice though. Makes it easy. You can draft a Corrupt Soul and summon a Corrupt Soul and keep pumping them out quicker because you can do both. Undead Titans also make for great frontline units. This is definitely something I would use. If I don't have dragons by this point, I will draft these guys as like my main frontline unit. This is the unit that I'm going to pocket with a summoner and with the hero hex bond. I believe it's, no, not hex bond. It's not the hex bond. There's a bond that links to teammates and gives them resurgence. So you get a tier 4 Titan with resurgence, with 2 retaliation attacks and frenzy, and that big old grin. These things are awesome. I believe it also, well, it can summon a skeleton, and I believe when it kills enemies, they turn into a skeleton as well. A skeleton, not a zombie. It can be a shield unit. It can be a mage. You get actually pretty useful units out of these. These things are awesome. You also get the Fallen Angels out of this tome. Nice big line AoE, good split damage. This is a mythic. I mean, they're both mythics, so they're not going to get any of our caster buffs that we have built in. Basically, if I have a Banshee in my army, I will replace that Banshee with a Fallen Angel if I can. These things are insanely strong. You don't really want to doom stack with them because the soul economy, not to mention the Imperium economy, gets kind of out of whack. However, both the Fallen Angel and the Titan, really fun units. And that's not all we get from this tome. This is really our big power spike here. We also get Unholy Champion, which kind of plays with our idea of pocketing 1 ace in the army. 50% damage, Armor of Despair, which I think like the Titans already come with. Those Titans, those Fallen Angels, they do silly amounts of damage when you give them this. Remember, The Titans will create skeletons when they kill things, so those are my favorite unit, is to pocket a Titan and put Unholy Champion on them and just let them flip the tide. Anything that dies to it becomes a skeleton automatically. Anything that doesn't die to it, I can raise as a skeleton using Mannimarco or any of the other heroes in the party. You also get a really solid enemy army spell if you can cast it on someone. Sometimes there's a spell jammer that stops it, but these give you skeletons with Unholy Champion built in, so they're not the strongest units, they're still tier 1, but they do get that big damage bump. Chamber of the Right is really, really good, especially if you're drafting more Corrupt Souls. In fact, I would say if you have this built, I would prefer to draft a Corrupt Soul than summon one just to get this extra hit points. And last but certainly not least, Undead Resentment. This is basically going to cut the weaknesses of the undead unit type in half. So undead, if you are an undead, you come with a inherent -4 to Spirit and Fire. This gives you +2, so we'll cut that in half to -2. And you get Vicious Killer, which allows you to Morale Bomb a little better. And we have a lot of tools to play around that. However, one little cool thing about this unit enchantment, this will buff your heroes and your ruler if they have the undead transformation. They will get the little dark halo. Moving on, Tome of the Reaper. Reapers, I mean, whatever. I think anything from Tome of Revenant is better than a Reaper. They do come with Dark Rights, but it's really hard to justify those over an Undead Titan. Soul Siphon, pretty awesome. Every enemy gets soulbound. You get to capitalize upon that, and you get a bunch of soul economy to work with. Harvest Population is a solid thing to have, and then you get some improved combat spells, a better reanimation spell, a decent little mark spell. Nothing too special in here, but it's the best tome we have left at tier 4. And then tier 5, Tome of Eternal Lord. Obviously, you're going the Lich King route. It's the only way to go. True Death Magic is nice, but I'm not going to go too into this because at that point, you're either winning or losing. It's not core to the build. It is, however, if you want to get Mannimarco's Ascended trait that I have chosen, which is Ascension Deathcaller. And I believe this, I could be wrong, but I believe this unlocks if you win a game and you have that tier 5 Shadow Tome unlocked. And this is quite good. Free cast, low cooldown. You get a random tier 1 skeleton, so if you do play with Ascendancy traits on, it gives you a lot of skeletons. And you don't keep them after battle, they're combat summon, but you get a lot of them. And all that said, that will be all for today when it comes to discussing Mannimarco and my Lich King build. A little bit of a teaser for a future build coming up. Somebody on the last one, the Imperial one, wanted Nords, and so I'm working on Nords. There he is. This is Nord Part 1. Doing a little bit of creative liberties. But we'll talk about Nords when we get around to Nords. That's a later video. You can subscribe if you want to be there for that later video. I'm just saying. Makes my life better. Anyways, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think, if you have any ideas, suggestions for further builds, or simply just input on this one. Take it, copy it, put in your own game, do your own twist on it, whatever you wish. All that being said, I'll see you in the next build. I do have a bunch lined up for Thrones of Blood, which is coming next Tuesday at time of recording this, so very excited. Werewolves, vampire hunters, vampires, and a fun build that is not what I don't think anyone else is thinking of this idea. So I've got a very fun, interesting concept coming up as well using the Thrones of Blood update. But you'll find out about that when those videos come out. So, until next time.